Miles was sitting across from me in a stained polo shirt, asking for a loan to cover his sublet rent, exactly 5 years after he told me my poverty mindset was a genetic defect that would ruin his life. The irony wasn't just rich, it was wealthy. He used to scream that I was an anchor dragging him to the bottom of the ocean, a liability that would capsize his inevitable rise to the C-suite. Now, I'm the only one with a boat, and he's drowning in the shallow end. I looked at him, really looked at him, over the rim of my latte. It was Thursday, 2 p.m. I'd picked the spot, a place near my consulting firm's office where the espresso machine hisses loud enough to cover awkward silences, and the sunlight is unforgiving. The light was doing him zero favors. The Miles I was married to wouldn't have been caught dead in a shirt that wasn't double mercerized cotton, freshly dry cleaned. This Miles was wearing a generic department store polo that had seen the inside of a washing machine too many times. The collar was curling up at the edges like a drying leaf. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he was systematically shredding a packet of raw sugar. His fingernails, once manicured to a shine that matched his ambition, were bitten down to the quick. "So," he started, his voice cracking just a fraction on the vowel. He cleared his throat, trying to summon that old boardroom baritone, but it came out thin. "I appreciate you meeting me, Stella. I know it's been a while." 5 years, Miles, I said. My voice didn't shake. That was the first victory. I placed my cup down on the saucer with a deliberate clink. "You said you needed to talk. You said it was urgent." He looked down at the pile of sugar granules he'd created on the table. "Yeah, look, I'm not going to give you some speech. I've had some bad luck. The market shifted. The firm had some compliance issues. It's complicated." "Compliance issues," I repeated, keeping my face blank. I knew exactly what the issues were. I knew his mentor, Tristan, was currently trading his bespoke suits for a prison jumpsuit after a federal securities fraud indictment. I knew Miles had been fired without severance because he'd tied his entire professional identity to a criminal, but I let him spin it. "Right. Anyway," he shifted in his seat, the cheap chair squeaking. "I'm in a bit of a transition period, just temporary, but cash flow is tight. And I remembered how good you were with budgeting, how you always managed to make things stretch." The audacity actually made me blink. "You remembered I was good at budgeting? Is that what you remember?" "I mean, yeah. You were always the grounded one, right? The practical one." He tried a smile. It looked like a grimace. "I was thinking, maybe, for old time's sake. If you could float me something, just until my next contract lands, I'd pay you interest, better rates than the bank." I leaned back, the leather of my chair cool against my silk blouse. "Miles, do you remember the last conversation we had in our apartment, the night you left?" He flinched. "Stella, come on. We were young. I was under a lot of pressure." "You told me I was a bad asset," I said, savoring the finance terminology he loved so much. "You said my salary was a joke and that you needed to divest before I dragged you down to mediocrity. You told your friend Julian that I was beneath your potential." "I was an idiot," he said quickly, the desperation leaking through now. "I was listening to Tristan too much. I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," I corrected him gently. "And that's fine, because you were right about one thing. We were on different levels. You just had the order confused." I looked at his ruined shirt, his shaking hands, the sheer defeat radiating off him like heat. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who would have apologized for his failure, who would have cooked him pasta and told him it wasn't his fault. That woman was gone. "I can't give you a loan, Miles," I said. His face fell, the mask of old friends catching up, slipping completely. "Stella, please. I'm 3 months behind. My parents won't take my calls. I'm looking at eviction." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and for the first time in years, I wasn't apologizing. I was just stating a fact. But that sounds like a poor investment on my part. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. To understand why sitting across from him felt like an out-of-body experience, you have to understand who we were when we started. We didn't meet at a gala or a networking event. We met 7 years before the divorce in a gymnasium that smelled like unwashed gym socks and stale cardboard. It was a charity clothing drive. I was there because I was a social work major, and volunteering was basically my personality. I was wearing leggings covered in lint and a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big, trying to wrestle a massive box of donated winter coats onto a folding table. Miles walked in, looking like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to a yacht club. He was wearing boat shoes and pressed chinos, holding a sign-in sheet like it was a contagious disease. He was there for fraternity service hours, mandatory volunteering, the kind where you show up, take a selfie, and leave. I watched him from across the room. He was standing in the middle of a pile of denim jeans, looking completely bewildered. He picked up a pair of overalls, held them up to the light, and frowned like he was trying to decipher an ancient scroll. The volunteer coordinator, a terrifying woman named Brenda with a clipboard and a whistle, marched him over to my station. "Stella, teach him how to fold. He looks like he's never touched laundry in his life." Miles looked at me, embarrassed, his cheeks turning a charming shade of pink. "Is it that obvious?" he asked. "I usually just throw things in a hamper and pray." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You pray to the laundry gods?" "I pray to the dry cleaner." He grinned. And that grin, God, it was disarming. It wasn't the shark-like smile he developed later. It was boyish and sheepish and seemed genuine. "I'm Miles, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." "I'm Stella. Grab a sleeve." We spent the next 3 hours side by side, folding endless piles of donated sweaters. And we talked. We didn't talk about stock portfolios or asset management. We talked about weird stuff. He told me he was terrified of birds. I told him I secretly loved terrible reality TV. "So, social work," he said, smoothing out a plaid flannel shirt. "That's intense, right? Saving the world?" "Trying to keep it from falling apart, mostly," I said. "It's hard, but it matters. What about you? Finance?" He groaned, rolling his eyes at himself. "Yeah, moving money from pile A to pile B and taking a commission. It's soul-sucking, but my dad says it's the only way to be a productive member of society." He used air quotes, mocking the phrase. "Do you believe him?" I asked. He looked at me, his hands pausing on the shirt. "Not really, but I don't know what else to do. I'm good with numbers, bad with feelings." "You seem okay with feelings," I said. "Only because you're making it easy," he replied. After the shift, we were both starving. I expected him to bail, maybe go meet his frat brothers for drinks. Instead, he pointed to a greasy pizza place across the street. "I will literally pay you in pepperoni to keep talking to me." We sat in a booth with torn vinyl seats, eating pizza that was 90% grease, and he listened. He asked me about my family, my dad the mechanic, my mom the school bus driver, and he didn't flinch. He didn't look down his nose. He told me about his family's lake house they never visited and the pressure to be great. And he made it sound like a burden, not a brag. "You're real, Stella," he said, wiping tomato sauce off his chin. "Everyone I know is just performing. You're actually real." I fell for him right there, over cheap pizza and napkins that felt like sandpaper. I thought I'd found someone who saw past the class divide. I didn't realize I was just a novelty act he was auditioning. The first 3 years were the golden era. We were broke, we were busy, and we were happy. Or at least I was happy, and he was convincing. We didn't have money for dates, so we improvised. Our favorite thing was hiking the trails at the state park about 40 minutes from campus. It was free, and Miles drove this beat-up Honda Civic that rattled every time it went over 50 miles per hour. I remember one Saturday in particular. It was October. The leaves were turning that impossible fire orange, and the air was crisp. We were halfway up the trail, breathing hard, wearing thrift store flannels. "Okay," Miles said, stopping to catch his breath and leaning against a tree. "Future visualization time. 5 years from now, where are we? This was a game we played. It felt safe then because the future was hypothetical. I'm running a program for foster kids, I said immediately. We have a house, a small one, maybe a bungalow with a porch where I can drink coffee and read. A porch? Miles nodded seriously. Crucial. Screened in or open air? Open air. I want to feel the breeze. And we have a dog, a mutt, something scruffy. He grabbed my hand, squeezing it. Okay. I'm a VP at a firm, but the good kind. The kind who leaves at 5 p.m. to come home and sit on that porch. And we have a grill. I'm going to master the art of the burger. You can barely master the art of toast, Miles, I teased. He laughed, pulling me into him. I'll learn. For the porch. For us. He kissed me then, and it felt like a promise. Standing there in the mud, surrounded by trees, with $0 in our bank accounts, I felt like we were building an empire. Not an empire of money, but an empire of us. We're going to make it, Stella, he whispered into my hair. We're going to build a life that's actually ours, not my parents'. Ours. I believed him. I believed that he valued the porch life as much as I did. I didn't see that when he talked about being a VP. His eyes didn't light up about coming home early. They lit up about the title. I didn't see that the modest bungalow was just a placeholder in his mind until he could afford the mansion. We finished the hike, sweaty and exhausted, and ate sandwiches I'd packed in a cooler in the trunk of his car. We sat on the bumper, watching the sun go down, drinking lukewarm soda. This is enough, I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. I don't need more than this. Me neither, he said. He was lying. He might not have known it yet, but he was lying. The shift didn't happen overnight, but looking back, the crack in the foundation appeared the night he made senior associate. He came home vibrating with energy. I got it, he said, slamming the door. Senior associate. And a bonus. A real bonus, Stella. I was thrilled. I hugged him, ready to suggest we grab takeout from our favorite Thai place, or maybe go for a celebratory walk by the river, our usual low-budget celebrations. That's amazing! Let's go get pad Thai and celebrate, or we could hit the trail this weekend. He pulled back, looking at me like I'd suggested we eat out of a dumpster. Hiking? Stella, I just got promoted. I'm not celebrating a career milestone by walking in the dirt. The tone was sharp, new. Oh, okay. What did you have in mind? Chop House, he said. The one downtown, the one the partners go to. I made a reservation for 8 Hoi. I looked down at my outfit, jeans and a sweater. I don't really have anything to wear to a place like that, Miles. And isn't it like $50 a steak? It's an investment, Stella, he said, using a word that would become his favorite weapon. And wear that blue dress, the one you wore to your cousin's wedding. The one from Target? Just accessorize it. It'll be fine. We went. The restaurant was dark, smelling of expensive cologne and aging beef. The menu didn't have prices on the wine list, which terrified me. Miles didn't even look at me for the first 10 minutes. He was scanning the room, craning his neck to see who else was there. When the waiter came, a man in a tuxedo who looked more dignified than anyone in my family, Miles put on a performance. We'll start with the oysters Rockefeller, Miles announced, not asking me. And for the wine, let's do the cab, the 18. He turned to the waiter. Is Jim roughly around tonight? Jim Sterling? Mr. Sterling is in the private room, sir, the waiter said, bored. Right, good, just checking. Miles adjusted his tie, looking pleased with himself for dropping a name I knew he'd only met once in an elevator. Miles, I whispered when the waiter left. This is going to cost like $300. We're supposed to be saving for the down payment. Stop, he hissed. His eyes were cold. Stop counting pennies, Stella. You're embarrassing me. People are watching. Nobody's watching us, I said, looking around at the room full of people eating their dinners. That's the problem, he muttered. They should be. He spent the rest of the dinner texting under the table. When the food came, he made me wait to eat so he could take a picture of the steak for Instagram. He didn't ask me about my day. He didn't talk about the porch or the dog. He talked about the partners. Who drove what? Who summered where? I need to look the part, he said, slicing into a steak that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Perception is reality, Stella. If you look poor, you are poor. I sat there in my Target dress, swallowing expensive meat that tasted like ash, realizing that the Miles who ate pizza on a curb was dying, and this stranger was taking his place. 3 months later, the obsession found a name: Tristan. Tristan was a senior partner at the firm. He was everything Miles wanted to be: old money, effortlessly cruel, and rich enough to treat people like furniture. Miles came home one Tuesday looking like he'd seen a religious vision. Tristan invited me to a strategy meeting, Miles said, pacing our small living room. Just me and him. He sees potential, Stella. He sees it. From that day on, Tristan became the third person in our marriage. Tristan says you should never check a bag at the airport. It shows a lack of efficiency, Miles told me while we were packing for a visit to my parents. Tristan says renting is just paying someone else's mortgage, he lectured while I wrote our rent check. Tristan says your environment dictates your net worth. This was the line that started the purge. I came home from work to find Miles standing in the middle of our living room with a trash bag. The coffee table, a scuffed, sturdy wooden thing we'd bought at a flea market, was gone. Where's the table? I asked, dropping my keys. Curbside, Miles said, not looking at me. He was eyeing our bookshelf. It's garbage, Stella. It's particle board. It screams dorm room. We refinished that table together, I said, my voice rising. We spent a whole weekend sanding it. Exactly. It looks homemade. Successful people don't have homemade furniture. He reached for the bookshelf and grabbed a framed photo. It was the one from our hiking trip, us muddy, smiling, exhausted. The best photo of us. He tossed it into the trash bag. Hey! I lunged forward and grabbed the bag. What are you doing? It's unprofessional, he snapped, wrestling the bag back. Look at us, Stella. We look like vagrants. If I invite colleagues over, I can't have pictures of us covered in dirt on the mantle. Tristan has art, real art. Tristan isn't married to me, I shouted. I am. That's our history. It's history I'm trying to overcome, he said coldly. He won the fight. The photo stayed in the bag. The next week, a sleek glass coffee table arrived. It was sharp, cold, and fragile. I was terrified to put a cup on it. Miles loved it. He said it looked clean. To me, it looked like a waiting room. The financial bleeding started as a trickle. Expensive dinners, new suits, but the car was the hemorrhage. I found the lease agreement by accident. It was mixed in with a stack of junk mail on the counter. I opened it thinking it was a bill for his student loans. When I saw the logo, a German luxury brand, and the monthly figure, my knees actually buckled. I had to sit down on a kitchen chair. $850 a month, plus insurance, for a lease. We were paying $1,200 for rent. When Miles walked in, I held the paper up. I didn't even say hello. Tell me this is a joke. Tell me you didn't lease a car that costs almost as much as our apartment. He didn't even flinch. He set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. It's not a car, Stella. It's a tool. I'm driving clients around now. I can't pick up a hedge fund manager in a Honda Civic that smells like wet dog. We don't have a dog, I screamed. And we don't have $850 extra a month. Miles, we have credit card debt. We have student loans. This is insane. It's ROI, he shouted back, slamming his hand on the counter. Return on investment. You don't understand how this works because you work in a field that generates zero revenue. In my world, image is currency. In the real world, math is currency, I shot back. If you spend more than you make, you go broke. It doesn't matter how shiny the car is. You're thinking small, he sneered. Tristan drives the S-Class. This is the entry-level model. I'm actually being conservative. Conservative? Miles, this is going to bury us. He walked over to the fridge and grabbed a sparkling water, the expensive brand he insisted we buy now. He popped the tab with a sharp crack. "It won't bury us, Stella. It will bury you if you can't keep up. I'm going places. I need a vehicle that matches the destination. If you want to stay on the bus, that's your choice." I stared at him. He was drinking his water, leaning against the counter, looking at me with pure condescension. He wasn't worried about the money. He was annoyed that I was ruining his fantasy with math. The car was the vehicle that drove us to the slaughter, Tristan and Victoria's dinner party. We pulled up to their brownstone in the city. It was massive, the kind of place that has a name, not just an address. Miles spent 10 minutes checking his hair in the rearview mirror before we got out. "Please," he said, turning to me, "just try to fit in. Don't talk about the sad stuff. Nobody wants to hear about foster care over appetizers." "My job isn't sad stuff, Miles. It's my life. Just keep it light. Talk about travel or wine." We walked in. The house was like a museum, white carpets, abstract art that looked aggressive. Victoria, Tristan's wife, floated towards us. She was wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my entire student loan balance. "Miles," she cooed, air-kissing him. She turned to me, her eyes scanning my outfit, a department store dress I'd bought specifically for this night, thinking it looked fancy. Her gaze stopped at my shoes. "And this must be Stella." "Hi, Victoria. Your home is beautiful," I said. "Thank you. We just had the foyer redone. The feng shui was all wrong." She led us into the living room where a dozen other people were holding crystal glasses. The night was a blur of humiliation. At dinner, I sat between a tax attorney and a woman who owned a gallery. "So, Stella," Victoria called out from the head of the table. The conversation stopped. "Miles tells us you're a social worker, is that right?" "Yes," I said. "I work with crisis intervention and foster placement." "Oh," Victoria said, her face twisting into a mask of tragic pity. "How noble. It must be so hard seeing all that ugliness. I don't know how you do it." "I simply couldn't handle the grime." "It's not about grime," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about helping families survive." Right, survival." Victoria waved her hand. "Tristan, darling, pass the truffle oil. Speaking of survival, did you see what happened to the market in Asia this morning?" She pivoted the conversation away from me like I was a dead bug on the table. But the worst part wasn't Victoria. It was Miles. Later, over dessert, the tax attorney made a joke. "I saw a guy at Costco today buying a suit. Can you imagine? I'll take a gallon of mayonnaise and a tuxedo, please." The table erupted in laughter, and Miles laughed the loudest. "Yeah," Miles chuckled, catching the attorney's eye. "You wonder if they know the polyester is flammable." I looked at him. We bought our first couch at Costco. We used to shop there together, laughing about the giant jars of peanut butter. Now he was mocking the very people we used to be, just to get a laugh from strangers who wouldn't care if he died tomorrow. I sat there stirring my espresso, realizing I was the only person in the room who knew who Miles really was, and he hated me for it. The end didn't come with a bang. It came with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It was a Wednesday in September. I'd had a hellish day. I'd spent 6 hours trying to find an emergency placement for a 15-year-old girl named Maya who had nowhere to go. I was exhausted, rain-soaked, and emotionally hollowed out. I unlocked our apartment door quietly, not wanting to wake Miles if he was asleep. It was 9:30 p.m. The apartment was dark, but I saw light spilling from the bedroom and heard his voice. He was pacing. I knew that pace. The frantic, aggressive walk he did when he was networking. I stopped in the hallway to take off my wet boots. That's when I heard my name. "I know, Julian. I know. But it's not that simple. I can't just dump her right before review season." I froze. My wet coat felt heavy, like lead. "She's a bad asset, man," Miles continued, his voice loud, confident, the voice he used when he was performing for the boys. "No equity. I'm trying to fly, and she's She's dead weight. Tristan keeps asking me why I'm with someone so beneath my potential. I stop breathing. Beneath his potential. It's an optics problem, Miles said. She shows up to these events looking like she's ready to serve the soup. It's embarrassing. She's a career liability, Julian. I need to divest. I just need to figure out the timing so I don't look like the bad guy. Divest. Like I was a failing stock. Like our marriage was a portfolio that wasn't performing. Yeah, he laughed, a cold, cruel sound. I mean, honestly, I could have done so much better. I just didn't know my own value back then. I settled, and now I'm paying the price. The keys were digging into my palm. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp tearing sensation. He wasn't just falling out of love. He was calculating the ROI of discarding me. I stood there for a full minute, listening to him plan his escape. Then I dropped my keys on the floor. Clang. The pacing stopped instantly. I gotta go, Miles whispered. The phone clicked off. I walked into the bedroom. He was standing by the window, looking pale. He tried to put on a smile, but his eyes were terrified. Hey, you're home early, he said, his voice high. I heard you, I said. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I felt like I was watching a movie of myself. I heard bad asset. I heard divest. I heard beneath your potential. He stiffened. The fear vanished, replaced by a defensive sneer. Stella, you shouldn't be eavesdropping. I live here, Miles. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was coming home from work. The work you think is embarrassing. I was venting, he exploded, throwing his hands up. I'm under pressure, Stella. You don't understand the stress I'm under. Tristan expects perfection. And yes, sometimes it feels like we're pulling in opposite directions. Opposite directions? Miles, I have supported every single thing you've done. I wore the dresses. I went to the dinners. I let you throw away our memories because they weren't high-end enough. And you talk about me like I'm a bad stock trade? Because you act like one, he shouted. And there it was, the truth. Look at you, Stella. You're soaking wet, you smell like cheap coffee, and you're content to struggle. You have a poverty mindset. You think suffering is noble. It's not. It's just sad. I help people, I said quietly. You help losers, he screamed. And you're dragging me down to their level. I need a partner who adds value, who brings connections, who looks the part. You're just an anchor. The word hung in the air. Anchor. I looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He was terrified he wasn't enough, so he needed me to be less. Okay, I said. He blinked. What? Okay. If I'm a liability, then you should cut your losses. I want a divorce. He looked shocked. He expected me to cry. He expected me to promise to buy better clothes or get a corporate job. He didn't expect me to agree with the business logic. You're serious. Dead serious. You want to divest? Congratulations, you're free. He stared at me, his jaw working. Then he scoffed, grabbing his suit jacket. Fine, if that's what you want. I'll go stay at the club tonight. But don't come crawling back when you realize you can't pay the rent on a social worker's salary. I won't, I said. You'll regret this, Stella. He spat at the door. You have no idea how much I was carrying us. He slammed the door. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The next 3 weeks were a master class in gaslighting. Miles didn't fight for me. He fought for his reputation. His mother called me 2 days later. Her voice was like liquid nitrogen. Sophie, she said. She always called me Sophie, even though my name is Stella. Miles tells me you're being difficult. I'm filing for divorce, Victoria. I don't think that's being difficult. I think that's being clear. Listen to me, she hissed. You were always a poor investment. We knew it. We tried to warn him. You don't have the pedigree for this family. Frankly, we're relieved. Miles deserves someone who can actually contribute to his future, not a charity case. I worked 3 jobs to put him through his last year of college, I said, my hand shaking on the phone. I contributed plenty. Pocket change. she dismissed. "Just sign the papers and go away quietly. Don't embarrass us." I packed my life into boxes. It was pathetic how little I had. Miles had thrown away most of my stuff during the purge. I took my clothes, my books, and the kitchen supplies he deemed low quality. He came by once to get his things. He didn't look at me. He walked around the apartment with a clipboard, literally a clipboard, marking things off. "I'm taking the OLED TV," he said, "and the espresso machine. You can't afford the pods anyway." "Take it," I said. I was sitting on the floor taping a box. "And the Le Creuset set. My mother bought that." "Take it." He stopped at the door, holding the TV remote like a weapon. "You know everyone is laughing at you, right? Julian, Tristan, they all think you're insane for walking away from this." "From what, Miles? A leased car and a husband who hates me? I think I'll survive." "You'll struggle," he promised. "You'll be poor forever because that's who you are." "Maybe," I said, standing up and picking up my box, "but at least I won't be you." I walked out of that apartment and left the keys on the glass table he loved so much. I took a cab to a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood with no elevator and bad plumbing. I had $400 in my savings account. I was terrified. But as I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my new life, I realized something. I wasn't carrying his weight anymore, and I felt weightless. My new kingdom was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage and despair. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, about 2 months after I left. I was sitting on a mattress that was directly on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed frame yet, staring at a cockroach that was brazenly crawling across my only pair of good work heels. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor, a heavy-footed man named Mr. Kowalski, snoring. I could actually hear the rhythm of his apnea. It was intimate in the most violating way possible. I was eating instant ramen, the 25-cent kind, not the fancy cup kind, because after rent and my student loan payments, I had exactly $188 left for the month. My stomach was growling, but not for food. It was that hollow, gnawing anxiety that comes when you realize you are one flat tire away from homelessness. I picked up my phone. Miles's name was still in my favorites. My thumb hovered over it. It would be so easy. Just one text. "You were right. I can't do this." He would love it. He would probably drive over in his leased Mercedes, pay my rent, and move me back into the guest room of his parents' house so he could remind me every day that I was a charity case. "Don't you dare," I whispered to the empty room. I clicked on Elena's contact instead. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. "Is everything okay? Are you safe?" "I'm staring at a bug, Elena," I said, my voice cracking. "And I'm eating sodium for dinner. And I think I made a mistake. Maybe I am a bad investment. Maybe I really don't have what it takes to survive without him." "Stop," Elena said. I heard the rustle of sheets as she sat up. "Listen to me, Stella. You are in the trenches. This is the part of the movie where the montage happens. It sucks, but it's necessary. I don't feel like a movie star. I feel like a statistic." "You're free," she said firmly. "You are eating ramen in a bug-infested apartment, but nobody is telling you that you're beneath their potential while you do it. Is the bug judging your net worth?" I laughed, a wet, choked sound. "No, he seems pretty non-judgmental." "Then you're winning. Go to sleep, Stella. Tomorrow we fight." I hung up and threw a shoe at the cockroach. I missed, but the act of throwing something felt surprisingly good. The desperation led me to apply for jobs I didn't want, but thought I needed. I convinced myself that Miles was right, that social work was a dead end, and I needed a corporate salary to survive. I landed an interview for an administrative role at a high-end philanthropic foundation. The salary was double what I was making. I spent 3 hours prepping, ironing my one good suit until the fabric shined. The interview was in a glass-walled office that looked suspiciously like Miles's old firm. The hiring manager, a woman named Janice with perfect highlights, looked at my resume like it was a napkin she'd found on the floor. "So," Janice said, tapping a manicured nail on the paper, "you've been in direct services? Crisis intervention?" "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter. "I manage complex cases, coordinate with state agencies, and handle high-pressure negotiations on behalf of families." "Right," she said, her eyes glazing over. "This role is more client-facing, high-net-worth donors. We need someone who speaks their language." "I can learn," I said quickly. "I'm very adaptable." "It's not really about learning." Janice gave me a pitying smile that was identical to the one Victoria used to give me. "It's about Polish. Fit. Our donors expect a certain pedigree." She didn't say, "You're too poor," but she didn't have to. The subtext was screaming. "I understand," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "You need someone who looks like the money they're asking for." Janice stiffened. "I wouldn't put it that way. But culture fit is important." I walked out of that building feeling smaller than I had in the apartment. I had tried to play Miles's game, the game of Polish and pedigree, and I'd lost again. I sat on a bench outside watching people in expensive suits rush by and realized I couldn't beat them at being fake. I had to beat them at being real. 2 weeks later, I was wrestling a laundry basket down the hallway. One of the wheels was broken, so I was half dragging it, leaving a scuff mark on the linoleum. "You're going to scratch the floor, and the super will keep your deposit," a voice rasped. I looked up. It was Mrs. Gable from 4B. She was about 70, wore oversized cardigans, and usually glared at everyone like they were personally responsible for the decline of Western civilization. "I'll buff it out," I muttered, sweating. "Here," she said, kicking the basket with her orthopedic shoe. "Lift from the knees, you're lifting with your back. You want to be a cripple by 30? She grabbed one end of the basket. I grabbed the other. We carried it to the laundry room in silence. While I loaded the washing machine, she pulled out a pack of Virginia Slims. "You're the one who cries on the fire escape on Tuesdays, right?" I froze. I didn't know you could hear that." "Walls or paper?" she said, lighting up beneath the no smoking sign. "I heard you talking to your friend." "About the bad asset husband." I flinched. "Ex-husband." "Good riddance." She blew smoke at the ceiling. "I was married to a man like that in the 80s. Thought he was God's gift to finance. Ended up indicted for embezzlement." I stared at her. "Really?" "Men who measure their worth in other people's envy always crash," she said. "I saw you studying in the lobby. Grad school application?" "Trying," I said, "for nonprofit management. But my personal statement is weak." "Let me see it," she demanded. "Now?" "I was an English professor at NYU for 30 years before they pushed me out for being too abrasive," she snapped. "Bring it here." I ran upstairs and brought down my crumpled draft. Mrs. Gable took a red pen from her pocket. Who carries a red pen in a laundry room? And started slashing. "Passive voice," she muttered. "Passive voice. Apologetic tone. I hope to learn. No, I intend to master. Stop asking for permission, girl." "You aren't asking them to let you in. You're telling them why they need you." She handed it back. It was bleeding red ink. "Rewrite it," she said, "and stop crying on the fire escape. It rusts the metal." I got into the program. I paid for it with loans that made me nauseous to sign, but I did it. I was the oldest person in my nonprofit leadership class. Everyone else was 22, wearing hoodies, talking about synergy and disruption. I was 29, tired, and wearing clothes from the clearance rack. The professor was Dr. Harrison. She was a legend in the field, a woman who had built 3 national organizations from scratch. She was terrifying. One Tuesday night, she called on me. "Stella, in the case study about the youth shelter, what was the primary failure point?" I cleared my throat. I think maybe the funding model was unstable. I'm sorry if that's wrong, but it seems like... Stop, Dr. Harrison said. Her voice cracked like a whip. The whole class went silent. You apologized before you even answered, she said, staring me down. Why? I just didn't want to overstep. You are paying thousands of dollars to be in this room, Dr. Harrison said, walking up the aisle to stand in front of my desk. You have 5 years of field experience. These children, she gestured to the 20-year-olds, have never filed a case report. You know the answer. Why are you apologizing for knowing it? My face burned. Habit, I whispered. Break it, she said. The world has enough women who apologize for taking up space. I don't train them. Now answer the question again, without the sorry and without the maybe. I took a deep breath. I thought about Miles calling me a liability. I thought about Janice at the foundation. The failure point was the reliance on restricted government grants that didn't allow for operational overhead, I said, my voice steady. They couldn't pay their staff, so turnover spiked and the program collapsed. Dr. Harrison nodded once. Correct. Next time. Say it louder. The transition from student to consultant happened because of necessity. My car broke down, the alternator died, and I needed $600 or I couldn't get to work. Dr. Harrison had recommended me to a small foster care agency that was drowning in paperwork. Go fix their intake system, she told me, and charge them for it. I sat in the executive director's office. His name was Bob, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. We need help, Bob admitted, but we don't have a big budget. I can redesign your intake protocol in 3 weeks, I said. I had rehearsed this in the mirror. It will reduce your processing time by 40%. That saves you about 20 staff hours a week. That sounds like a dream, Bob said. How much? I froze. I had planned to ask for $1,000. It felt like an insane amount of money, but Mrs. Gable's voice was in my head. Stop asking for permission. $2,000, I said. My heart hammered against my ribs. Flat fee. Bob didn't blink. Done. Can you start Monday? I walked out of his office and sat in my car, which I hadn't fixed yet. I'd taken the bus. I stared at the signed contract. I had just made more money in a 10-minute conversation than I used to make in 2 weeks of grinding casework. It wasn't just money. It was value. For the first time, someone was paying me for my brain, not just my ability to endure suffering. 3 years later, I walked into my new office. It wasn't a corner office in a skyscraper, but it was mine. It had big windows that let in actual sunlight, not the fluorescent hum of a basement. I had 3 employees now, all women, all from backgrounds like mine, smart, hungry, and previously undervalued. I sat down at my desk and looked at the blue velvet couch in the corner. It was a deep, rich navy. I'd bought it last week, not because it was a specific brand and not because a magazine said it was in. I bought it because I liked the color. It was the first piece of furniture I had purchased in 5 years that wasn't secondhand. Stella? I looked up. It was Maria, my lead analyst. The impact report for the State Department is ready for your review. Thanks, Maria. I took the report. On the cover, it said Jennings Consulting Group. I wasn't rich by Miles's standards. I didn't have a summer home in the Hamptons, but I had a retirement account. I had a car that started every time I turned the key. I had a passport with stamps in it. Places I wanted to go, like a solo hiking trip to Patagonia where I slept in a tent and didn't worry about whether my hair looked expensive. I had built a life, a real one, and the silence in my head where Miles's criticism used to be was finally, blissfully, permanent. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the lobby of a hotel in Chicago preparing to give a keynote speech on trauma-informed systems. My phone buzzed. It was Elena. Text, turn on the news, now. I walked over to the hotel bar where a TV was playing CNN. Breaking news. SEC raids offices of Carmichael Holdings. Billions in assets frozen. I stood there, clutching my laptop bag. The screen showed footage of agents in windbreakers carrying boxes out of the building. The same building where I'd attended those suffocating Christmas parties. The ticker at the bottom scrolled. CEO Tristan Carmichael arrested on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Massive Ponzi scheme alleged. And then, the anchor said it. Several senior partners are also under investigation, and mass layoffs are expected immediately as the firm's assets are seized. Miles. He had tied his entire existence to Tristan. He had modeled his walk, his talk, his car, and his life after a fraud. I waited to feel something. Vindication? Joy? A surge of, I told you so. I checked my pulse. Normal. I checked my feelings. Nothing. Just a mild, distant curiosity, like hearing about a weather event in a country you once visited. Ma'am, the bartender asked, you want a drink? No thanks, I said, turning away from the screen. I have a speech to give. 2 weeks later, Elena and I were drinking wine on my blue couch. Real wine, not the $4 bottle. Okay, so here's the tea, Elena said, her eyes bright with gossip. She still had friends in the finance world. Tristan is looking at 20 years, but Miles, it's arguably worse. How so? I asked, tucking my legs under me. He wasn't charged, so he's not going to jail, but he's radioactive. Nobody will hire him because he was Tristan's right-hand fanboy. He got fired with 0 severance. Ouch. It gets better. The lease on the Mercedes, repossessed. He defaulted. And apparently, he moved back in with his parents, but they kicked him out after a month because the dad's firm lost money in the Carmichael collapse, and they blamed Miles for not knowing better. His mother must be thrilled, I said dryly. She hates a poor investment. He's living in a sublet in Queens, Elena finished, pouring more Pinot Noir. And word is, he's trying to network his way back in, but everyone has blocked his number. She looked at me, waiting for a reaction. Well, how does it feel? It feels logical, I said. He built a castle on quicksand. It sank. It's just physics. You're too zen, Elena laughed. I'd be dancing on the table. I don't need to dance, I smiled. I'm just glad I got off the elevator before it crashed. I was working late, reviewing a grant proposal for a domestic violence shelter. The office was quiet, the city lights twinkling outside my window. My laptop pinged, a LinkedIn notification. Miles Whitfield would like to connect. I stared at the name. For 5 years, he had been a ghost, a nightmare I woke up from. Now, he was a pixelated avatar in a wrinkled shirt. There was a message attached. Sophie, I hope you're well. I know it's been a long time. I've been going through some transitions and realized I never truly apologized. I'd love to buy you a coffee and catch up. No agenda, just closure. I hovered my cursor over the ignore button. I didn't owe him anything, not a minute of my time. But then I paused. If I ignored him, it meant I was still afraid of him. It meant I was still hiding. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the CEO of my own life. I typed back. I'm busy, but I have a 30-minute window on Thursday at 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop near my office. I hit send. My hands didn't shake. Back in the coffee shop, the silence stretched between us. So, Miles said, looking at the loan request I had just rejected, that's it? You're just cold? After everything we had? We didn't have anything, Miles, I said gently. We had a transaction. You thought you bought a muted, supportive accessory, and you were disappointed when I turned out to be a person. He flushed. I loved you, Stella. You loved the idea of yourself, I corrected, and I was just a prop in your biopic. But here's the thing, I'm not a prop anymore, and I'm not a bank. I stood up. I placed a $20 bill on the table. What's this? He asked, staring at the money. For the coffee, I said, and for the closure. Consider the debt settled. Stella, wait, he scrambled to stand up. What do you do now? I heard you started a company? I did. Is it working out? There was a desperate hope in his voice that I was failing, that I was just pretending, just like he used to. I smiled, a real, bright, dangerous smile. We just closed our third government contract, I said. I'm doing exactly what I always told you I wanted to do. I'm helping people, and the market has decided that's a very valuable asset. I watched the realization hit him. He wasn't just broke, he was wrong. His entire worldview, that money equals worth, that kindness is weakness, had been disproven by the woman standing in front of him in a silk blouse he couldn't afford. Goodbye, Miles, I said. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the afternoon sun. I didn't look back to see if he took the money. I didn't care. I checked my watch. I had a meeting with Dr. Harrison in 20 minutes, and then I was meeting Mrs. Gable for an early dinner. I started walking, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the pavement. I had a business to run. 3 months later, I wish I could say there was some big, dramatic fallout, but the truth is quieter and better. Miles stopped emailing me after I ignored his third request for a brainstorming session. Last I heard from Elena, he's working as a junior analyst at a logistics company in New Jersey, reporting to a 24-year-old. As for me, I just bought the bungalow. It's small, it needs work, but it has a porch. Last night, I sat out there with a glass of wine, paid for with my own money, and a dog I adopted from the shelter, a scruffy terrier mix named Asset. Yes, I have a sense of humor. I watched the sun go down and thought about the girl who used to cry on the fire escape. I wish I could go back and tell her that her value was never on a balance sheet, but she knows that now. We both do. And the view from here? It's priceless. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.